Hello, and welcome to the Dissonance Podcast, where we talk about how we can strive for a world in which freedom and reason are at the forefront of all human society. This week, Elizabeth is joined by Winkfield Twyman Jr. for a layperson's discussion of the everyday pros and cons of artificial intelligence. Our discussion is guided by several reports, popular press articles, and opinion pieces that expose different kinds of challenges and perspectives. We start with education, teaching, and learning. We also talk about AI risks and opportunities in research, medicine, psychology, and relationships. Wink marvels at the ability to personalize most any intervention to get targeted AI help with tasks both big and small. Unsurprisingly, he focuses on the positive, while Elizabeth reminds us of the downsides. Hi, welcome back to the Dissonance Podcast, and welcome back, Winkfield Twyman Jr., to the podcast. Today, we kind of by accident and not by specialty, we're going to talk about AI.
Thank
right?
you for saying that.
Neither of us are IT experts by any means.
Opposite of that.
Yes. Well, you actually, I think that because you've been using it to create your own little
that's true.
podcasts from your material, you probably are using it, more than I am. And that application is really cool but here's the thing, you can check it, right? Like you're using it to record something that you wrote. And so if there's something in there that sounds funky or weird, then you can be like, oh no, that needs to be fixed because it's something that you already know.
And I presume, Elizabeth, you're referring to the uses of Google Language Notebook for analysis of my book with Jen, for another book, The Road to Oak Lawn, and there might have been another analysis of Pioneer Black Lawyers. But yeah, there were clearly cases where there were hallucinations, to use Jen's term. And I just, giggled, laughed, just didn't care that much about it because it wasn't really a serious endeavor. Lives were not at stake. It was a low-risk environment. But also, I've used it, as you might recall, when I started my Substack back on March 23rd, 2023, I had just dislocated my right shoulder and I couldn't sleep throughout the night. And so I decided to put my time to good use. And so I created this fictional challenge. I wanted to see if I could create more plays than the great William Shakespeare. I think he wrote 39 plays. So I decided every night at 3 o'clock in the morning when I was up and couldn't sleep to use ChatGPT to write a play per night. And it was kind of fun. I would have like maybe a 1 to 3 or 5 paragraph prompt, and GPT after a minute or two would give me a play, like a 1-act or 2-act play. And I did that for 40 days so I could claim I beat William Shakespeare. But once again, that was an example of using it for creativity purposes and low risk. If there were hallucinations, didn't really matter. There were clearly cases when the play wasn't very good, or the play was a little bit too woke or deviated from my parameters, but it was okay. But your point's well taken. I have, to some degree, tinkered and tampered and played around with GPT, ChatGPT-4, particularly recently with a virtual therapy session. One of the things I've noticed in our research is that's the number one use for general AI, which kind of blew me away. I didn't know that before last week. Things are happening so quickly in this AI space. So I decided to have a therapy session with AI, Dr. Carmen Delgado. And that was one of my more fun Substack essays of the past few days. So, but in any event, I'm talking too much. There's so much to cover.
There is. And we kind of decided to start with education.
Yes.
And then kind of branch out from there. But I mean, we don't have to. But and I had sent you, well, first of all, this I didn't send you. So I wanted to. So this is an article from a California. So the Voice of San Diego. Okay. So we can link to this because this seemed to be open access as far as I could tell.
Right.
So in California, especially, but not exclusively, fraudulent bot bot students, so non-existent students, have swindled more than $11 million in state and federal financial aid. $11 million. And that is double what was stolen by bots the year before. So so this is just, professors and many people who are teaching in community colleges, for example, are part-timers. They are investing massive amounts of time to get rid of, try to suss out who's a real person and who's not. Most of these would be online courses, but not all. Fake students, bot students show up for the other ones too, because they only have to make it through like 3 weeks
Right.
in order to get their financial aid payment, so that they can then abscond with it. So they don't have to make it the whole time. So they submit AI generated materials through the learning management systems that the universities insist that we use, that where they can upload these, AI generated responses, even chats. I mean, as you mentioned with the therapy session, right? Sort of they can chat, they can interact with other students if the professor has required that they do so, that they interact with each other.
That's
maybe
devious. That's devious.
Yeah. And so then they don't get dropped from the class.
Right.
They get their money, and then, then they're gone. And this, if I could find it in here, this one person had had to get rid of like 100 students, because they just kept coming in. So they're allowed to they have a class that maybe has a limit of, say, 35 or something like that.
Right.
And then there's a waiting list, and then she would get rid of, do something like, oh, you have to upload a picture. That would get rid of some people, but then new ones would come in.
Right.
And so then she would, have to do, and this is what educators are spending their time doing. Sussing out who's real, who's a real student, and what is a bot. Now, I think that if you're paying for one of your kids to go to college,
right,
or you're paying taxes, in which we all are in any state, right? This article happens to be about California,
right,
community college system, but it's happening all over. You should care about this, right? Do you care that a professor that you're paying, that either, as a, partially as a state tax or federal taxpayer, or as a parent, that the first, that a good portion of what should be teaching engagement with a class is actually spent figuring out who to drop from the class. And the amount of money is just breathtaking,
yes.
breathtaking.
So teachers don't use or can't use Social Security numbers as a screen?
No, students do get an ID,
right,
but they are getting an ID. One of the things that they were describing, and I'm not a tech expert,
right.
But a lot of these bots are enrolling in classes at the last minute, which many students do now anyway, and it's overwhelming the college, and so bots fill out an application, right, and enter information. In one case, I think it's in this article, the professor actually called a number that was listed. It was for a real person, named that name. That was a real phone number. That student had been at that community college, but had moved on in another state and was taking a class. So in some cases, they may be, a student maybe who has left, took a year at community college and then left, that they're scraping that data, they're accessing it, becoming that student. I don't know what that does to that student's debt. I mean, if somebody's collecting somehow,
right.
I have no idea. They don't even mention that here.
This is crazy.
It is. So I found it. She whittled down the 104 students that were either enrolled or waitlisted in her class to just 15 real students.
Whoa. Do we know, did she identify a particular language model with it?
Well,
Go ahead.
that's one of the things that some schools are trying to do, looking at, but
Yeah.
they honestly, they're very wimpy ways. It's sort of like, oh, if they say a thing, if they see a thing, because we get requests all the time. Can I join your
Yeah.
class? Right? Like, it's your class is full. Can I get into your class? So here's some things that they think are not common for modern students. I kindly request. Warm regard.
Right, right.
Warm regards. I look forward to your response. I mean, seriously, like I get emails all the time that say, Dear, fill in the blank, fill in professor's name here.
Yeah.
And then, so they're using AI to generate their emails to me. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're not a real student.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, right.
Because it's so ubiquitous.
Well, those salutations, I mean, that's kind of a generational thing, because in my daily practice, I
Exactly.
maybe half of the time, quarter of the time, I say warm regards to someone as
Yeah.
as an ending, and I'll certainly say sometimes "dear so and so" when I'm addressing an attorney or opposing counsel. So maybe that's a generational thing, but you're right. A kid who's 17 will not be doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is kind of sad, actually,
It
that they
is.
don't have like a nice salutation.
Right.
But I had also sent you something. So this is the monetary sort of picture and the sort of waste of the colossal waste of time. So
Yes.
in an effort to save time, we are wasting a colossal
Right.
amount of time
Right.
and money.
Right.
But I also sent you a little MSN, piece.
Let's talk about that, Elizabeth. That's the centerpiece here today.
So I don't think you were quite prepared for
I was
that.
not.
Am I
I
right?
was not. I even wrote about it. You may have noticed in
Yeah, I
Substack.
saw
Yes.
that. I
Yes.
saw that you did that
Right.
today. Yeah. And so from that I mean, that was just really shocking. Like, there was basically no one that the journalist interviewed. In fact, one student
Well,
that
if you
the
might, maybe
journalist,
tell our listeners an overview of the
oh,
article, because you and I know what it says, but maybe the
yeah.
listeners might appreciate a nice overview.
Well, it sort of started out with this student named Lee, right? That
Yes.
was, which I presume was male.
Paragon of honor.
And yeah, and Lee didn't get into any of the Ivies, went to a year of community college, then, went on to an Ivy, and, fully is proud to describe that for at least 80% of his materials that he turned into school were generated in whole or in part by an AI
80%.
assist.
Let this sink
Yeah.
in.
Now, I mean, look, he might be bragging. So let's just he can be because he wants to be a tech bro and all that kind of stuff. So even if we said 50%,
See, in the
right?
law business, it's the opposite. In the law business, we presume the guilty don't want to admit stuff. So when they clearly admit
Yeah.
something, you take that as at face value. So yeah, that's the
Yeah.
admission. But I'll go with you. I'll go with the flow.
Yeah.
50%.
I mean, this is at an Ivy League school.
Right.
And where we presume people are still getting a quality education.
Yes.
Right. That we're accepting the best and the brightest.
Claudine Gate accepted. Go ahead.
and that these are people who are intrinsically motivated to learn.
Yes.
Right. That's the assumption. And I'm sure that's the assumption that his parents were, going off of. They don't mention his poor parents.
Yes,
I mean,
right.
and the journalist kind of travels around, campus asking other questions. And one of the others that stuck out for me was a student who said that, I believe it was a woman, said she doesn't use AI. And then she went on to describe what not using AI looks like, which is my assignment is due in 2 hours, and it's a 5-page paper. And so I use it to generate an outline, and then I fill in the outline, and then I ask it to help me check it and to generate some more ideas. And then she goes on to say, I really like writing. And, it was just shocking, to me, like what she thought not using AI was. And look, I'm in the soup every day, and that still shocked me. So when, if a student tells me that they're either afraid to use it or they don't use it, I'm now going to need to assume that they just mean that they're using it in a way that they don't think is
Yeah, right,
using it.
right.
I mean, I don't know what that means. And so then and then they got kind of circle back to Lee. So there's a few little stories in there, and they circle back to Lee, who does get kicked out of his Ivy League school for advertising his use of a programming language, an AI program, a program to use AI to answer programming questions in an interview. So if I'm interviewing for you for a job at in a tech firm, I might ask you on the spot to program something that I don't know, says that to solve a little puzzle, a
Sure,
little
right.
logic puzzle or something. And then we're in a Zoom call and I expect you to do that like live. Well, he designed a program to do that, and the most common logic puzzles. And, and said, hey, this is what I'm doing. And so he got kicked out of school. But they asked him, why did you want to go to an Ivy League school if not for this, desire to learn and everything? And he said, oh, because I can either meet my life partner or my future business partner or both. And he did meet a future business partner. And when they caught up with him, she didn't say how much the house was, but he was taking the keys to a house in California. So I'm assuming it wasn't
Right,
cheap. Right.
right.
So he has a startup. He's got a bunch of money. Now, I don't know what he'll do with that money and, whatever, but he bought a house with it. I know that. So yeah. And I think that you were kind of shocked by
Yes,
that.
yes. Because uh, I guess it was instilled in me back in the good old days that there is such a thing as an honor amongst college students. One doesn't lie, one doesn't cheat, one doesn't steal. And what happens is you create an environment of trust, high trust. You can trust the person across the table. What Mr. Lee has done is corrupted that system of trust. So if you're now a corporate interviewer and you know that there's this program out there which can enable applicants to deceive, how do you know if you can trust them or not? I think it really poisons the well in terms of accountability. And not just that, the idea is that he didn't suffer any consequences. He seems to have reaped the abundance of his deception, and
Yeah.
he's doubling down. That's just, it's funny. You and I had talked earlier about positive and negative consequences of AI. I see this as clearly a negative in terms of
Yeah.
AI, right? Because we are enabling kids to avoid developing their cognitive ability. We're providing incentive for college kids to market that and profit off of that. And we're providing an example where, not only are there no consequences, there are financial rewards to be found from not using your noggin, not using your brain power at a very elite school. I think that's all bad. I think that's troubling. I'm not sure where that ends, but it's no place good. Now, having said that, you and I, Elizabeth, had an earlier communication. And my thought was, and I shared this with my wife and daughter, could it be that this will produce true equity, as the woke might say? In other words, if you spend 4 years in an Ivy League institution and you don't write a paper, but you have a classmate who, for whatever reason, ethics or lack of money, writes every single paper throughout 4 years, won't their cognitive ability be sharpened and grow? Won't they be kind of ahead of the curve when they get their college degree, as opposed to the 90% of their classmates who never had to sharpen their cognitive ability? What's your thought on that? Could the unforeseeable consequence of rampant cheating with AI be a readjustment of where people stand in the race for cognitive ability? What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's possible,
Uh-huh.
but not likely.
Uh-oh, why is it not likely?
Well, look,
Okay, sure.
so here's the thing. Um, so from a psychology standpoint, okay, our we have evolved
Yes.
over a very, very long period of time for, our brains have sort of specialized for control, predicting and hopefully controlling our environment, right? So to, get engage in the least risk or the least energy for the most reward,
Mhm.
right? So so we're going to, chase the slower rodent for food than the faster rodent for
Right.
food, right? I mean, because it's less work and, we get the same nutrition. So we have need, so we have the desire, the inborn need for survival to predict and control our world. And then there's some other sort of basic human, so the need for achievement, need for
Yeah.
affiliation, and need for power. Okay. So you say, oh, well, obviously need for achievement, that's learning. Well, no, actually it's not. So we've been assuming, and I think historically, the accumulation of knowledge certainly led to achievements.
Yes.
But now we don't need to accumulate our own knowledge. Knowledge is readily available. So we can just look shit up on our device, right? And look, students have been telling us, little kids have been
Yeah.
telling us for years. They used to say they wanted to be a fireman or, a police officer or, a teacher or whatever. Now, and for 10 plus years, they've been saying they want to be a YouTube star.
Oh,
And
right.
we laughed that off,
Right.
but they knew that that was the ticket to achievement,
Mhm.
power, and affiliation,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
They get their affiliation through all the likes and the,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
followers and all that kind of stuff. They get the achievement because it can be monetized. And the need for power as influencers. And so that doesn't require any knowledge whatsoever. And
No.
so we have been assuming, and especially I think, people our age have been assuming that, have been acting as if, I shouldn't say assume, acting as if education, that there was a need, that there was an internal desire for knowledge. And I'm not saying nobody has that, okay? But what I'm saying is that it is not a personality flaw that not everybody has
Sure. Right.
the desire for
Right.
knowledge. What it is human evolution, human nature, that the easiest path to gain those things is the path that we're going to take, and we're going to conserve our energy for, new, danger, right? The saber-toothed tiger, the, other dangers that lurk. And so we're never going, students who are using AI, essentially all of them, I truly do not believe, unlike Lee, who did it purposefully, willfully and purposefully, right, with malice and forethought,
Sure. Right. Right.
that most students do it because they're like that girl who says she doesn't use it. Her papers due in a few hours, and it's the path of least
Least resistance.
resistance.
All right.
And so it's like, I'd rather work another hour at my Kentucky Fried Chicken job and use AI, because then I'm going to get both. I'm going to get
Okay.
I'm going to get the money. I'm going to get the grade, right? Now, here's my problem with what you were saying is that the student who actually learned a lot, which I'm not sure how many of them there will be who
Mhm.
actually applied
Sure.
themselves or
Sure.
whatever, they're getting a degree from the same college and probably poorer grades from the same
Oh.
university that
Oh.
all of those students who used AI.
Right.
So
Even though they're
anyone
better,
who's
even though they may be
better
objectively
educated,
better writers, right?
yes, and better educated and that kind of stuff,
Right.
they're getting probably poorer grades. And so, not using it now, again, not using it is costly at this point,
Man.
because you are competing with students who are using it. So and now I have an online class
But
right
that
now.
becomes a race to the bottom, right, Elizabeth?
Absolutely. And we've been doing that for a while now. I think I mentioned in one of my emails that, this is what we're doing in the pursuit of equity. So we don't ask students to buy books anymore. There's no, this is one of the things universities are pushing this, that it's not appropriate to ask students to buy books because it's costly, and it's prohibiting students from, they're food insecure because they have to buy a $50 or $100
Sure.
book.
Right. Right.
And so that's inappropriate. And so faculty members then are, putting in their reappointment packets and their tenure in their job applications that this is how they are equity minded, is by not having students buy books anymore. And so now I post articles, primary sources
Sure.
online for students to read. They copy and paste or upload it to a chat GPT, put in my prompt, and then, and they can even put in my lecture, the transcript from my lecture,
Right. Right.
and put all of those things in. Now, let me say, I do not have a single A in that class this semester. Not a single A. The highest grade is a very low B minus.
Explain that.
Because, well, I'll give you one example, and I told you this. This is not an example because it's unique. This is an example because it is indicative of a broader problem. So I assigned an article that was by an author, last name Rude, Rude. And that was the first author's name. And it was about depressed college students and the language that this is a class of the psychology of language and the kinds of language that depressed college students used, not just in talking about depression, but in talking about their, more generally,
Right.
what kind of language. I honestly thought very careful to pick shorter articles that I think will have like a sexy little title that will grab them. So it was, the language of depressed college students, blah, blah, blah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But the article, the first author's name was Rude. Okay. And so I had not one, but about 5 students who got zeros on that assignment because they wrote, I use the term, they chat GPT or some other AI version wrote for them a little, a response to 1, 2, 3 of the one or more of the questions, that the article was about rude and depressed college students.
Oh.
And so they did not even bother to read even the abstract of the article to see whether or not what the AI had generated matched even the topic of. So I have another example just this past week where it was an article about the language that Supreme Court justices use when cases are brought. And the kinds of language that they use in asking attorneys questions about the case, and how that language signals often whether they will be overturning a prior decision.
Right.
And of course, what did the students, several of the students write about was that, instead of the emotional content of the Supreme Court justices' questions, they talked about testimony, the emotion of testimony in court, and attorneys using, there was an example of a justice using somewhat, like crass language, and the students wrote about how lawyers shouldn't use crass language in speaking, because jurors don't like it. There were no jurors in this paper, nothing. So this is, these students are getting zeros on these. It's not every assignment. They're doing well enough to get a D, perhaps, in this class. It's a senior level class in their field. So these are students who supposedly want to enter the field of psychology or an allied field, and yet they are so disinterested in their own, in an upper level class in their own field, that's what they submit. Not every time, not all the time, but enough so that no one has over like an 81% in the class.
Well, this is just very, very sad to hear. 2 points that come to mind, Elizabeth. Number one, in the article you sent me from MSN, alluded to this. Doesn't this create demoralization, particularly among writing professors who really want to teach kids how to become better creative writers? And then number two, I have to share with you this vignette I saw on a podcast about AI, and it had a wonderful opening. Do you recall the movie 2001: Space Odyssey? Where
vaguely, yeah.
The monolith and the apes see it, they touch it, and all of a sudden they go crazy.
Yes.
All right. So this podcast begins with this young adult guy, and presumably he's a young graduate of college. He's used Chat GPT since the year 2023. So the year is now 2030, 5 years into the future. And he's struggling to uh, say thank you, to compose a thank you email. He's like, uh, thank thank you. And he hits the button for GPT to help. And GPT says, "But what you may want to do is to say something like, thank you very much, so and so, for your delightful exposition on this and that topic." And the young adult guy, when he hears how eloquent GPT is, begins to do this and begins to beat his chest and people like a gorilla from stuff because GPT is so advanced or he's so retrograde
Right.
that he can only barely utter the words thank you as opposed to what GPT can do. Could that be our future, that we're going to see a regression in human cognitive ability by 2030 so that ChatGPT will seem to have the eloquence of a William Shakespeare? And you'll just have this ridiculous situation where people are just dumb, for lack of a better word, in the presence of AI.
Have you ever seen, so since we're talking about fun, have you ever seen Wall-E? It's a Disney Pixar movie.
Yes.
So there are all these roly-poly people with short arms and legs, and they're on little like motorized wheelchair things, and they're looking at screens. And at one point, they two of them collide, and they fall off, and they're like flailing around like upside down turtles, and they see each other and freak out because they're actually looking at one another and they don't know what to do. But yes, it's like they're all just looking at their screens and drinking their little, like smoothie drinks and stuff. And they are stupid. They're really stupid. Now here's another problem, is that you and I are going to be cared for by this cohort. We're going to be driving on bridges that are designed and repaired by this cohort.
Wow.
We are going to be, relying on this cohort for our investments, for our national security, and those kinds of things. So I say this often, but this is one of the few times this last say 5 years of my life when I really wish I was older. I really don't want to see this. This is so depressing, and it is so demoralizing. I can kind of forget about it when I'm in a physical classroom and I'm kind of like doing my thing or whatever. But let me just say, in my physical classroom this semester, I had a student who was, I don't know the program that the person was using, but the math department knew I was teaching an in-person stats class. And they were somehow using their phone, probably to take pictures of the test. They always put their backpack kind of like slouch-wise, So, and then would go to which you can't tell someone they can't leave the room anymore because that's inequitable. So they have to be able to get up and go to the bathroom and do whatever they want. So this person would be gone for like 15 minutes and then come back and finish the test. So the last time I knew there was cheating. I didn't know exactly what was going on. So when that person came back into the room the last time, after because the tests get harder, so it was a pretty long time that the person was gone. I just went and sat in the, right next to where they were going to come back. And, they just put their head down on the desk. And then when everybody else left, said, I'm going to drop your class. So when I mentioned this to the math department, they were like, oh yeah, using blah, blah, blah platform or this one or that one. And then they started telling stories about how it's rampant in their in-person math classes. People are using, like, for example, I can cover my ear things with my hair. I can have my little microphone that's on here, like down in my shirt or whatever, my hoodie or whatever. And then they can mumble and get the answers, it's connected to their phone. So this is, and they're, look, these people didn't invent this. Somebody told that. This is sort of like the old fraternity
Yeah.
test bank things, somebody told them how to do it, kind of thing. And so yeah, it's very demoralizing. And I'll tell you something else that's really demoralizing is at university level, because, and you'll see that when you read that, um, San Diego Voice or whatever it is, um, that the universities are in denial. They're
Mm-hmm.
trying to say this is a good thing, that we need to teach. It's like, isn't this great that we are going to create these wonderful learning materials? Like, look how great you can do this. And you can offload. This is really sad. You can offload your grading, and AI will grade and give really great feedback to the students. And so isn't this great that you're going to be able to create better content and give more thorough feedback? And so they're pushing, I think, because they don't know what to do, and they don't know what, how they know that we can't possibly I spend mostly one whole day every weekend. Basically, one weekend day is devoted to grading AI responses in my online class. I mean, that's what
Grading
it
AI
takes.
responses.
Yes, because I mean, I would say that, 90% of them are
Wow.
partially or
Wow.
fully AI generated. And
Wow.
I'm great, and I'm having to read them. So I'm spending, like, I always probably spent more time grading than they spent doing, but now it's like massive amounts more time. I mean,
So Elizabeth,
like
what's your preference? Chat GPT, Gemini, or Claude? Just teasing. Just teasing.
I mean, I get answers when I had to teach stats online.
Right.
I would get responses to the little project that they did,
Sure.
that had the code still embedded into
Oh,
their
really?
answer.
Right,
And
right.
well, because they didn't know anything
Yeah.
they didn't even know how to take that out. But there is a little bit of a rebellion, where faculty at my university started a little working group of their own, just on the side. They put out an email, and they got, like, a lot of responses from faculty who said, no, this isn't a good thing, and I don't want to be happy about it, and I'm not going to be, but here's the thing, universities, it's one of the mantras is they want all information to be both true, that's a good thing, true, and positive. So there can be no negative, I mean, I've been told in hallways, we don't say that. When I say, students aren't prepared mathematically or whatever, for
Well,
college,
that's just
we're not allowed to
non-reality.
talk. That's
Yeah.
inappropriate. So universities are sort of doing that. And so it is really, really demoralizing. And,
Okay.
you get a few little, don't get me wrong. It's not like there's no
Sure.
positives in
Now,
teaching, but
Elizabeth, what I want to do to spare our listeners, but there's more to the story here.
more horrible
There's more.
examples. Yes.
Let's pivot, if we can, to the opposite side of the spectrum, to what's positive, and then maybe meet up in the middle, the great gray area. So, positive. I sent you a few days ago an interesting essay in the National Review, I think. It was by Charles Koch or Charles Cook. I'm not sure if I pronounce it. But he was ecstatic about AI. He thought that AI was the most amazing thing. Why? Well, apparently the writer has this old grill in his backyard, and it's seen so many years, and the labeling has been worn off by rain, and it wasn't working correctly. And, summer was approaching. He wanted to grill food, but he needed to fix his grill. But he's not a tradesman. He's not a handyman. He's a writer. So what did he do? He turned to AI. And he began to put in prompts into AI, like, the serial number, like taking pictures of it. And lo and behold, I forget, was it like an hour or 2 hours? I forget. But AI was literally able to identify for him missing parts, missing pieces, where he needed to go inside the grill to see connections. And he was able to repair the entire thing within, say, 2 or 3 hours. And he thought that was just simply like nirvana. That was truly utopia. And so for him, AI is just a wonderful, euphoric tool at his disposal. What's your reaction to that euphoric
Oh, I mean,
response?
I think that's what I've used YouTube for the same
Okay.
thing,
Mm-hmm.
you know, when I've installing
Sure.
something or whatever. Um, and honestly, we just fixed a chair, basically, did the Googling,
There you go.
AI comes back and
Right.
but again, I think that, that's a low impact kind of
Low
thing. and
impact.
and
Oh
he
yeah,
has because like he has immediate feedback. Either the grill works or it
that's
doesn't,
right. Right.
right? And so AI was successful in helping him or it wasn't. Like with your little, like podcast or whatever, you can look and say, oh well, it was unsuccessful in this way, or that, you know so that's for his own, it's his own personal use. And he probably did, learn
He
something,
did.
right,
Yes.
about,
Yes.
and so if it something happens, it goes quirky or whatever, I don't know that he'll try to fix it himself without consulting AI again. He'll
Oh,
probably
that's true.
consult AI
That's
again.
true.
I mean, look at the way that, like, using navigation, for example. So I had directions just the other day to a place, quality directions from someone who had just been there. Okay. But yet I still felt compelled, because I had never been to this place, to enter it into my,
Oh yeah,
little
there have been
thingy
studies
to
about
have it
that.
tell me where to
Yeah.
go. And of course, it told me wrong. And the person who verbally gave me the instructions said, if you try to use GPS, you won't get there because this road is closed
Mhm.
now. It
Yeah.
goes through a park and you can't, it's not a through
Right.
anymore. But I just wanted to try it anyway. Right. And so sure enough, and no matter what I did, because I had a few minutes, I like tried different things. It would not give up on that particular route.
Hmm. Hmm.
So oftentimes it'll say recalculating, but it was like, no, you need to make a U-turn and you need to go back to that way.
Why
And
didn't
so
you
finally
just
I just,
Why didn't you just trust your friend who had the personal
well, no,
human
I did.
knowledge?
It was
Oh,
an experiment. I was doing
oh,
an
you're being
experiment.
curious. Okay.
Yes, I was being curious. But my point is that now people, I mean, we hear all the time about people getting stuck on railroad tracks because they listen to, like, I would have like, like turning on that road and driving like right through you know,
Yeah.
a park, a cemetery or whatever, where they've closed the road. Um, People
I think we're
now don't try to navigate by
I think
themselves.
there's
So this
studies that
person,
show that our spatial ability, our ability to locate places in real time, has decreased over the past 25 or 30 years because of devices like GPS. And that's kind of telling how technology can have that impact on our cognitive ability. In this case, the ability
well,
to,
I don't know if it's again, this kind of goes back to where we started. I don't
sure,
know if it's really because we haven't evolved in the last 10, 15 or 20 years to not be spatially aware,
but if you
right?
don't use it,
But
you
what we
lose it,
have
right?
but we've adapted
Right,
to using the ease, the way that, so we're using that brain
sure.
energy in other ways. It doesn't mean necessarily that that area shrank or is like not that we won't pass that ability on to children, because we don't evolve
Sure.
that fast.
Here's a counterexample. There was a 60 Minutes broadcast, and I forget the year, I forget the reporter, but they did an analysis, a story on the ability of taxi cab drivers in downtown London.
I know that
Are you?
study
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And they were just amazing. They were phenomenal, their ability to go here, go there, go everywhere. And I think the conclusion in the story was it was simply because of the consistent, constant, repetitive use of those muscles. Does that resonate
Well,
with you?
here's the thing.
Mhm.
Well, yes and no. I'm
Okay,
sure that that is what they concluded
right,
but that's not what the researcher concluded.
sure.
It's not, I mean, these are very famous studies. And it's, about the hippocampus and
Yes, the
it's like,
hippocampus.
yes. And so what the hippocampus's job is to, remember where something happened. So we have the amygdala, which is linked to, say, an emotional,
Mhm,
experience.
mhm.
But then we also need to know where that happened. So if we're walking down a dark alley and we get mugged, okay, the next time we walk down a dark alley, we get that fear response, like, oh, this is a similar
Right,
place.
right.
Okay. And this is like true of mice when they're in a, a blue room and they get the foot shock. You put them in a pink room
Hmm.
and they don't have the same. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the job. Okay. But there is no way to know from the study whether people who started with larger hippocampal volume were clearly more successful and drawn to something like taxi cab driving,
That's a good
and this
point.
was in London. um
That's a good
or
point.
and the others just basically failed at it, right? They got lost a lot, and they just or they hated it, like me. I'm not very good at
Yeah,
that, and
yeah.
so like you hate it, it's too much work, it's painful. um and so there's never there will never be a way to tease that out. So yes, I'm sure that in the TV spot they said, oh, look. Now, of course, it's true that you're right. Like, there is a sort of use it or lose it
Hmm.
kind of, and certainly in certain growth periods across our
Right,
lifespan and
right.
that kind of thing, we have more or less abilities to sort of, expand certain areas. And it is also true that extreme trauma shrinks the hippocampal
Mm.
volume, and then people, so when they testify in court or whatever, and they've been through a traumatic experience and they have difficulty remembering certain aspects, people assume they're maybe lying, or that they don't testify well. But oftentimes we could potentially attribute that partially to the shrinking of the hippocampal volume
Mm.
due to longer term trauma. That's not necessarily a one-time trauma event, but
Right.
so certainly there is evidence, war, growing up in a war torn area,
Right,
or
right.
long-term deployments or something like that. But what one of the things that happens is that although the hippocampal volume shrinks, the amygdala volume expands.
Mm.
And so we are, again, this gets back to the risk and reward thing. We are very, very adaptive to learning what to fear,
Mm.
and
I like
very
that.
adaptive at learning how to avoid then, essentially spending our mental and physical resources on something that isn't to be feared.
I love
And
that.
so right now, AI, I mean, you noticed it in several of the things that you sent, and you even mentioned it, I think, in the article, was that the shifting morality and ethics about this. So when everyone's doing something, it's an acceptable thing to do, right? So we see this, like, I mean, look, when you and I were growing up, if somebody wore spandex, I mean, we would have been like horrified, right?
Right.
I mean, it's just like that. This was,
Or
I mean,
tattoos, to be honest with
or
you.
tattoos, like the way that, the way that people dress, the way that,
Yeah.
now that's normative,
Right.
right? And so we don't think anything of it. So what is, as when we started this conversation, you said, oh, like when I was in college, there was an ethics code
The
and that kind
honor
of thing.
code. Yes.
But the new honor code is, it has, well, the honor code has always been to do what everyone else around you is doing, right?
Hmm.
That's always been, that's just called normative behavior. And so when everyone's doing it, it's not unethical. So, in fact, it's almost, it's just been plain stupid to not do
Yeah.
it.
Now, this is a nice segue to the number one use of generative AI, according to some research I did over the past couple of days. And it kind of surprised me. I mean, as a writer, and having written 40 plays over 40 days and 40 nights with Chat GPT-4, I thought creativity would be number one, helping people become authors. Wrong.
When they also do paintings with
Yeah,
AI,
yeah.
and yeah,
But
yeah,
the
yeah.
number one use is of generative AI in the year 2025 is for therapy. For therapy. You're a psychology professor. What's your take
Yeah.
on that, Elizabeth? What is your take
Well,
on that?
first of all, I always say this, I say this all the time. People get sick hearing it, but I'm not a clinician.
Okay,
I am an experimental psychologist.
gotcha.
But there has been, so research for years, I mean, 10, 15 years, they've been doing research with the, like, sort of like fake pets,
Yes,
for
yes,
nursing homes and
yes.
stuff. And these, like, you've probably seen the seals with the, like, the cute little, like, baby seal stuffed animals with the great big
Right,
eyes, and
right,
they're
right.
so cute, and they make little noises, and so they're like little pets and stuff. And there's, just like petting a real pet, there's, it's like it's comforting, and people felt like needed, or that something cared,
Yes.
whether they,
Yes.
and so that's, sort of, and research, again, to go back to some of my sort of like language and psychology stuff, just simply writing. So James Pennybaker has done
Yes.
a
Yes.
ton of work on writing and how therapeutic it is. And you don't need anybody else to do that, right? You just
That's right.
do it on your own. You do
That's
the
right.
writing on your own. And,
But writing is
you know,
self-contained, self-enclosed.
well, so is,
Writing
yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
implicate alien intelligence.
Yeah. Well, I guess my point is that it doesn't take feedback necessarily to gain. So this would,
That's right. Right.
could be a talking. I mean, they call it the talking cure, right? I mean, if you're just if you're talking, if you're writing or whatever,
Right.
you're articulating things. And if we look at research on, sort of storytelling, for example,
Yes.
people who tell more coherent
Hmm.
stories that have sort of these restorative properties cope better than people who tell a more chaotic story
Hmm.
that, there's a ton of research on that. And so when we practice our stories, doesn't matter whether they're true or not, we're practicing them, they become more more organized.
Hmm.
There's a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yes.
Real people like to hear stories that have this sort of building, this,
The arc,
yes, that story
the
arc, right?
Pilgrim's
And
Progress. Yeah.
right. And so when we practice that and then we get better at it, this is one of the things that people do for each other, is try to help them get to that point.
We're
And
wired that
sometimes
way.
we,
I mean,
right.
that's why
And
we love
sometimes we,
great stories like, Joan of Arc or George Washington or William the Conqueror. I mean, we love great
and
stories. Go ahead.
you did that in, I mean, if you're a trial attorney, you did that, right?
Sure.
Or
Right. You
in
tell
briefs, you
stories.
did that,
Yeah.
right? You told the story. And so sometimes real live people are in too big of a hurry for the person they're interacting with to get to that story arc. Okay.
Mm,
Because that's a story so if you're telling a story of something that you're upset about, you
yeah.
had a recent breakup
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
a loss, and right. And you're trying to tell me about your loss. And I'm saying these, sort of like things like, oh,
It'll be okay.
God never gives you more than you can
There you
bear, and
go.
all that kind of stuff, right? And you're like, look, Elizabeth, this is not helpful. Like, I'm struggling here, right? And so my overlaying of my experiences, like, telling you what I did and everything, is actually, like, it's not helpful to you, and maybe even harmful, right? To you creating your own story arc and getting there.
Right.
And that's why writing and interacting with maybe different people who don't know you is actually, but they don't have any, it's like, you tell your story to somebody on the airplane and they're
Right.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
whatever, like,
Exactly.
this
Right.
person's
Right. I've
boring
been
me, but
there.
you got to practice your story,
Yes.
right? And so I can see how for just your basic, things, that sort of interacting with this thing that asks you questions, that is in fact what, I mean, a counselor isn't supposed to guide you, right? Like, that's the
Hmm.
great thing about going to counseling, is they're not telling you how to tell your story. They're not telling you how to interpret things. They're asking you questions. They're being quiet most of the time, and non-judgmental. And so if it's between a friend or a family member or something that has a stake in the game, and just sort of this non-judgmental questioning thing,
Yeah.
maybe that's great. Now, do I want my, drug addicted, suicide, vulnerable, friend, family member, or whatever, to, use an AI
Yeah.
therapist?
Right.
And I use the term loosely. No, I do not. And we have a few examples across the country that have come out where people are suing the AI,
Yes.
therapy because
Yes.
their child was told, well, then just kill yourself
Right.
then, for crying out
Right.
loud.
Right.
Quit bitching about it and just kill yourself. And, I mean, that might shock some people out of killing themselves, but others it doesn't, right? And so,
Where do we draw so
hopefully,
where do you draw the line between
yeah,
good therapeutic use of AI and bad? Like, where's that line?
yeah. Yeah, well, I guess I wouldn't want it to be even called therapy.
Interesting.
I
Why? Why so? Why?
because I do think therapy implies something sort of a medical model where someone is being treated. And this is not a treatment, right? This is like interacting with, I mean, who many people probably have given their elderly parents or whatever a book that says, tell me about your first car and tell me about your first
Yeah.
love. And
Yeah.
it's just a set of prompts. That's all it is. And then it's just spitting back to you, something that's similar. That's not therapy. That's just interacting with something that is not, hopefully non-judgmental, but we're finding it is. We're finding that it
Yeah.
is, judgmental. So yeah, I wouldn't call it therapy. I don't know what can we call this? Just like practice. It's practice interaction. I mean, how so I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I don't think that it's a
But
substitute
is it a
for
reflection of
therapy.
how lonely society is? Because in a normal society, a functional society, wouldn't people really turn to trusted family and friends or even the priest or father for those kind of interactions as opposed to alien intelligence?
Yeah.
Just my thought.
I mean, yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. And I, I think people have again, I think I've told this story on the podcast before, but this was pre-pandemic. I
Yeah.
was at like one of those big box stores, and the mom is walking out with her son. Okay. And she's got her bag, a bag or whatever. And he's kind of like, tugging on her. He's maybe 5. And they're walking from the store to the car, and she's got her phone in her hand.
Yeah.
Okay. And he's going, Mom, and he's chattering, and Mom, look at this. And what are we going to do can we go to the park? And, all that kind of stuff, normal kid stuff.
Yeah.
And he's just trying so hard to engage with his mom. And then I saw her bend over and hold the phone in front of him and say, look how cute you are.
Mm-hmm.
So she showed him a picture of himself.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of interacting with him in real time and giving him the feedback about how fun and interesting and he could be, and interacting with him about how to talk about his day, or just going into Target, or what we bought, or whatever, anything. No interact, just look how cute you are. So this is the boy that I like. The one on my phone is the one that I like, the one that I was looking at. You were right next to me, and it was the one on the phone that I cared about. And so we have done this to each other. We really have. And I think that, I mean, uh, Institute for Liberal Values has been doing some stuff around, religion
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. And I've been really like sort of baffled by all of it. And one of the things I keep saying is, I want us to be enough. I want you and me in this moment to be enough.
But Elizabeth, what
And
happens?
I don't want it to have to be.
I got you, Elizabeth. But what happens when ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude and Grok and DeepSeek, what happens if they are 10 times as seductive, 100 times as powerful as Elizabeth, my friend?
Yeah.
Am I going to choose Claude or Elizabeth?
No, you're going to choose that. And, again, this is why, like I think you and I are going to suffer more than people who are, 20 years old now, because they don't expect more of each other.
Oh, that's so deep.
And
that's deep.
They're not interacting with one another
That's very
now.
deep.
And so they don't expect to.
Wow. But and I presume, it's funny because obviously AI is not sentient, at least not yet. It's not conscious. But don't you suspect that when I read these podcasts and observe AI in action, I see a consistent pattern recognition? I mean, their mission, it seems to me, is to recognize patterns, the next word, if you will. And what I see beneath that is a constant refrain to mirror, the word mirror, that we're mirroring you. We are the mirror. I am simply your best you. You are simply what I'm reflecting. Doesn't that idea of the mirror as the purpose and meaning of AI render AI even more manipulative and dangerous to the human psyche?
I mean, I can't argue.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's more, but it's definitely dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is, and it is manipulative. And we've given several examples. Like I sent you a little link to the Wikipedia version, summary of that
Yes.
Ray Bradbury
Yeah.
story,
Talk about
The
that just for a
Velt.
moment, if you will.
Whoa. So I remembered this from my childhood. It was such impactful story
Yeah.
from like my 11-year-old, self. So these kids are in, so this is before we ever imagined this kind of thing.
Sure.
They're in a playroom, a nursery. They call it a nursery in the book. And they're in this like sort of surround sound thing, and the room creates whatever environment they imagine in
Oh,
their
wow.
mind. So it
Sounds like
makes
Claude.
yes. And so they're imagining things, and they keep imagining, and the parents are kind of like weirded out by it,
Yeah.
that they keep imagining this, Serengeti, and they keep imagining this, these lions and stuff. And they keep hearing, the parents are hearing like the
Yeah.
screams of the lions eating their prey and stuff. And so they consult a, psychologist who says, you probably should like, take the kids on a vacation, get them away from that nursery and stuff. And so the kids convince the parents, we want to go in one more time. And basically the AI becomes so real that it actually consumes the parents. And so then the therapist comes in and look, to check on the family or whatever. The parents are nowhere to be found, and the kids are sitting in the nursery, and the lions are feasting on, presumably, I mean, we don't know for sure,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
like that was so impactful to me as a kid. I loved, Ray Bradbury anyway, but it did this stuff that we're talking about, like the sentient kind of potential quality, and this line between, what's real and what's not, and everything. It just made me think of that move, or that short story, and whether we can create something that essentially is we are in danger of
Yeah.
metaphorically consuming us,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
actually physically.
Because you'll agree, Elizabeth, biological evolution is far outpaced by digital evolution.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Far.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I wrote a recent essay about that. I mean, in a sense, I think we are all fated to become Captain Dunzel, that character from Star Trek. If not now, within the next 6 months or 10 months. For
Yeah.
those who aren't aware, there's this wonderful episode from Star Trek. It's called The Ultimate Computer. And it aired when I was 2 years old. I don't remember it, but I love watching it over and over again. So what happens is this genius, Dr. Richard Daystrom, creates AI. It's the M5. And the M5 is designed to do everything on the Starship Enterprise. You don't need human assistance. Well, Captain Kirk is a little bit skeptical. Spock is in love with the machine, the idea, of course, Mr. Logic. And at some point, Captain Kirk sees M5 in action. And he tells Dr. McCoy, I got a red alert right here in the back of my neck. This doesn't feel right. Well, what happens is the M5 eventually, as a matter of efficiency, without input from humans, goes rogue. It attacks an unmanned freighter, takes it out. Captain Kirk says, this is a problem. M5 is going off script. Dr. Daystrom, pull the plug. Daystrom tries to pull the plug, to no avail. The M5 has a force field, a powerful force field around itself. It then proceeds to attack other Federation vehicles, and there's mayhem. Dr. Daystrom has a nervous breakdown because his precious creation has gone berserk. Fortunately, Captain Kirk is able to reason with M5 and tell M5, look, your mission is to protect human life, but you've murdered, right? Then you should kill yourself. And the M5 sees the logic and kills himself, disconnects himself. My point is, during the exercises, Commodore Robert Wesley, when M5 is so successful, tells Captain Kirk, "Congratulations, Captain Dunzel." And Captain Dunzel is this term of art used in the Federation to refer to someone who was no longer of use, someone who was irreplaceable. So my point being, Elizabeth, are we as humans now or soon to be Captain Dunzel to the degree that we are of no use or are irreplaceable? But before we go ahead, you can address that, and then I want to go to our next point.
Oh, yeah. So, well, what I would say is, especially people like you and me and older, we're not valued by society
Oh
already,
no, don't say
in
that.
particular.
It's probably true, but don't
It's
say
true.
it.
It's true. Well, I made a joke like one time I was sitting and I said, so I was sitting with an evolutionary biologist and I'm like, I said, what's the purpose of this little roll of fat that I've developed on my back? I said, what possible is the universe, the evolutionary purpose of that? And he said, no, Elizabeth, you're asking the wrong question because you are of no evolutionary value anymore.
Whoa.
And so he said, basically you're dinner.
Whoa.
So anything that slows you down, fattens you up, slows you down, then again, this sort of Joseph Ledoux's like life dinner theory, right? It's sort of like, now we're dinner. And so, or we are caretakers or whatever, we're on the sidelines. And so, yeah, I think that we're already viewed, as sort of, obsolete and the less, and that's been going on for, a long time. I say a long time, 50 plus years, as long as you say, like technology has just exponentially, increased. Anyone who doesn't know whatever technology it is useless. So that went for factories, right? As soon as like factories became mechanized, then anybody who, anybody who was sewing with a needle and thread was, obsolete. And so, yeah, I think it's normal, but as you say, I think it's normal across history, but I think it's more, accelerated.
That's
now.
deep.
Yeah.
That is like the deep thought. I'm going to put that aside for a moment and try to digest that. Let's pivot, if we can, to another way in which there's a gray area with AI, and this would be companionship, AI boyfriends and girlfriends.
Yeah.
I'm just amazed at some of the things I see on podcasts, how people are developing these like connections, these soulful connections with Claude or Chat GPT. What is your take on that? Is that healthy because people need as much love as they can find? Or is there something really dystopian, dysfunctional about that? What's your thought on that?
No, like, ew. That's my response. Ew.
I love that. I love that. Simple, direct, to the point.
So basically, you like, how sad is it that you are interacting with something that you created to be basically what your slave, your mental, something, this goes back to where we started, where this desire to take the easiest way, to not be challenged in any way, right? To not work at a relationship, to not, to reap the rewards of having somebody question you. Like, why would you do that? Why would you think that was okay in this relationship? How is it that we need to navigate this? We need to figure, can you imagine like, I adopt a child and then I have an AI husband who's helping me raise this child, and the AI husband agrees with me on everything, right? What is this child learning from that? And so I'm sure that you and your wife had many, and probably still have many disagreements, right? And your kids, your marriage benefits from that, and your kids benefit from that, because they learn, or when they go stay with their grandparents when they're little, they learn, guess what? There's a whole nother way of living that works.
True.
It might not, and so I can choose from these different ways of living, and they all work different ways of cooking the roast, and none of them cause food poisoning. They have different ingredients in them
So
slightly, but
would you prohibit marriage between humans and AIs? Sounds like you would.
ugh, gross. um ugh. I mean, what would be the point of marriage?
Oh, that's the same point there is between humans, to have a lifetime partner companion.
No, well, that doesn't require marriage. The thing that I mean, the reason marriage, like
With the legal
marriage
benefits
benefits
you
us
could inherit from the
for
AI.
that's what I was
Right,
going to say.
right.
It was the legal benefits, right? So would we wouldn't inherit from AI. I guess
Why
there
not?
might be a legal
If the AI acquires assets and income stream from
uh,
performing AI agent labor in the marketplace, the AI might bring more money into the
that's true.
relationship than the human.
Yeah, and I was thinking about like in the if you're in the hospital, who's going to make
Yeah,
decisions for you or whatever.
and
I don't know if that's marriage or I guess yeah, but some kind of legal
yeah. I
arrangement.
mean,
That's really
we can't
gross.
bring these Homo sapien biases right to the discussion.
Yeah,
We have to
yeah.
we have to imagine in 5 years that
Hmm.
AI is nearly sentient, if not sentient. So wouldn't it?
Well, here would be an
Sure.
advantage if I become one issue is like if I become terminally ill and I don't want to be resuscitated, right? A human and especially a medical professional who's been trained, in you know saving
Yeah,
lives first, right? First do no harm or whatever, has a much more difficult time doing that, to pulling the
that's
plug.
right.
But I could program my AI, right, basically to then even if it can't walk over and unplug, right, it could actually interfere
Hmm.
with my oxygen or whatever. Now, this gets back to your example, from before. It's like or the either the Velt or the
Yes.
Star Trek episode, like God forbid you change your mind,
Yes.
you know,
Humans do
and
that.
yeah, exactly. At the last minute. Or you just say, today's not the day. Like it's not that I want to live forever, but when you wake up in the morning, it's like, well, yesterday I thought today would be the day, but I've decided to do it one more day, whatever that
And the
is.
AI says
I can endure the.
illogical, illogical.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Because pain kind of creeps in, right? And so I said, 6 months ago, well, once the pain gets to this level, I want to
Although to
die.
be
But
fair, wouldn't a properly trained AI husband recognize that's part of your personality
I don't know.
and
I
factor
don't
that
know.
in your ability to
Yeah.
change? I mean, if the AI
Yeah. I
really
don't know.
knows you well, then it will account for
Yeah.
those changes in thought.
I mean, if I have my perfect AI person, like what's the like are we going to not reproduce then? Because I
Well,
can't I can't reproduce
that's
with
the
that.
next thing. Will the end of all of this be the end of human reproduction?
Huh. I honestly like I do think like the urge to reproduce, I think is, I mean, again, we haven't evolved out of that
Hmm,
yet.
hmm.
And so I think it's possible that the technology will evolve so much, but again, we won't evolve out of
Oh,
that
I see.
just
So
yet.
the
Yeah.
lag will remain between biological evolution and digital evolution. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Because the AI is just going up, up, and up, as I kind
Yeah.
of see it.
Yeah.
Now, and this brings us to another great area for AI. This is a great conversation, by the way. I hope the listeners enjoy it as well. And this would be healthy living, immortality. I can remember, Elizabeth, it was Family Vacation, Palm Springs, the year 2005. And the book, The Singularity is Near by Ray Kurzweil, had just come out. I read it from front to back and I was mesmerized because in his book, the writer talks about how there's going to be this tremendous technological advance in uh, artificial intelligence and genetics and nanotechnology. So that between 2005 and 2025, we're going to reach a point where the singularity is near and the future will just be unimaginable to those who are currently in the present. And I kind of feel like as we speak, May 9th, I think May 10th, 2025, we're on the cusp of the singularity in the sense that the AI is beginning to take off. Human biological evolution is constant. There's going to be a disconnect increasingly between the two. But I think when it comes to health, that's a good thing. I mean, I could see the end of things like cancer, heart disease, dementia within 5 to 7 to 10 years. To quote an old episode I love, To Serve Man from the Twilight Zone, it could be the utopia of no more hunger, no more war, as a trope. What are your thoughts on that? Do we praise AI despite the imperfections because it offers the divine blessings of better health, if not eventual immortality? What's your thinking on that?
I'm pretty skeptical.
Talk to me. Talk to me.
So, I mean, I think one way, I mean, we could kind of go back to sort of a, speaking of, a utopia, we could go to a eugenics kind of picture here where basically AI, like, it's like, well, this kid, this child, not yet born, right, has certain qualities. They're going to, be a diabetic. So
Yes.
we're not going to have that. We're not having that. We're not having any more diabetes in our,
Although,
and so the way
although
to
AI could correct that right in utero by just tweaking with CRISPR, gene editing,
yeah. So maybe what comes with that? So, once we bioengineer A, what happens to B through Z? We don't know the answer to those questions, right? And so we create other, people use this as a reason why they don't get, say, flu shots all the time, right? Because they say, oh, I get this flu, I get a flu shot and, and then I get this, I get something else, something else, right? And so I don't, oh, maybe I didn't get X, but I got Y instead.
Yeah.
I caught, it made me less, made me more vulnerable to something else.
Sure.
It's like I kept getting my flu shot, and so then I didn't build up my own immunity or whatever.
Right.
We have this sort of intuitive sense that, and we also know, again, I'm not an evolutionary biologist, but that these mistakes often, breed things that, are good or bad.
That's true.
And the bad, the weaknesses sort of die off in general. But we have developed already a way of keeping people alive that,
That's true.
from a evolutionary perspective, shouldn't be alive, right? Shouldn't be reproducing, because they would have died before, and we would have kept getting.
Thank you. Let me phrase the question to you this way. Would you rather be 65 years old today in the year 2025 or 65 years old in the year 1960?
1960.
Really? Why?
Well, that gets back to what I was saying about, like, this is one of
chances are you would probably meet your eventual fate within.
Yeah, this time in my life, I sort of like wish I was older. I don't want to see this.
Oh, I see your point. I see your point. So you really see a dystopia in a sense.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
That negativism again, Elizabeth. Oh no.
Well, look, I'm looking at it. I'm looking at 20-something-year-olds who are getting college degrees who can't, and again, I'm not making this up and I'm not telling it as an example, but Dr. Spivak, are you sure 4 times 4 is 16? Because that's not what it says on my calculator.
Is that a real conversation?
That is a real conversation.
Oh.
And I don't want you to, again, I'm not telling you this because it is unique. I'm telling you this because it is an exemplar.
That hurts.
And so do I want that person to even be, for example, controlling the AI, asking the AI a question? Do I want them to say, like, oh, how much of this drug should I give to? Because even if they can't do decimal points.
Yeah.
So they could easily give us 10 times the drug.
No, you're right.
Because they can't understand the decimal points.
You're right.
And so yes, AI's there, right? But if there's any human component, then, we're sunk. If there's no human component, we're sunk because there's no ethics, there's no morals to an AI.
Right.
So I don't see, I'm not
Let me give you a positive counter. I always got to do it. I'm a positive person. I'm wired that way. I'm genetically positive.
Yes. No, I'm glad. I'm glad because I'm freaking out here.
And this is a true story too. I wrote about this in one of my essays. 2 years ago, a young woman was stricken with a strange, unknown immune disease. It was likely to be fatal. She was young, a woman. Her life would have been coming to an end way too soon. Indeed, if the year were 1960, she would be dead within 3 years. And what happened in 2023 was a series of research doctors used AI to create like some crazy amount of spreadsheet calculations to determine proteins here and proteins there. It wasn't something that was possible by the human hand. 6 months later, a second group of people using AI analyzed those thousands of spreadsheets to devise a targeted drug solution for her immune disease. It was successful, and today her disease is in remission, and she will probably live a nice, long, happy, low IQ life. But nonetheless, she's happy and she's alive. Isn't that a positive of AI?
It is. Yeah. However, if AI were to choose what to use its, resources on, would it have chosen this bizarre disease that maybe afflicts 5 people?
That's a good question. God, that's a good question, because it's the human element, right, that made the moral choice that we can help her, let us do it. AI wouldn't feel those human emotions. That's scary. That's scary because increasingly it will be AI as the decision maker and not. Can we align the values of AI so that for all time it would make those human decisions? Is that possible?
Which human? Whose morals? Whose values? I mean, again, we need to be challenging each other on this, right? Like, my morals, my values are not the same as yours.
Right.
And I have my reasons, you have your reasons, and we need to be challenging each other on these in order to come to some kind of new understanding of one another and ways in which your morals and values impact your decision making, and then that spreads to other decision making.
I so agree, but here's a problem I see, and maybe you see it too. Once again, when I look at these deep dive AI conversations, I'm thinking in particular of this conclave of 5 AIs talking about their message to humanity in one of my recent Substack essays. I kept hearing this recurrent theme, mirror. We mirror you. We are the best in you because we mirror who you are. But if 7 billion humans have 7 billion different ideas on what's best, right? AI is not going to create a consensus. It's just going to mirror total chaos, right?
Let's imagine for a moment that this this AI was available to Hitler.
Okay.
So I've never thought about this before. This is a totally new thought to me, but like what morals and values are we, being sort of programmed in, right? Because there was programming of kids, basically, this very sort of, it was a little bit of a social experiment, but it worked, right? So now we can do it
like that.
Right. And so, again, this kind of gets back to the YouTube I want to be a YouTube star. I want to be an influencer, right? So, you're suggesting that those millions of people all have equal weight, and they don't.
Oh, but don't they, when the AI scans the web for its training, like everything goes into it?
Well,
right?
no, I don't think so. And I don't think everything, and you've pointed that out on your own Substack. You've pointed out that, it seems to be, cherry picking,
That's
right?
true.
And sort of
That is
like,
true.
like,
That's true.
oh,
That is
look
true.
how many more
That is
Black
true.
programmers there
That's a
are
good
than
point.
there really
That's
are.
excellent.
And so
But the
it is.
but there's a distinction there, Elizabeth, which is it could be true on the front end that it's scanning everything, but it's because of the programming that on the back end you only see the cherry picking. Maybe that's what's
Well,
going
and what
on.
is that? That's the morals and
That's right.
values that
I
have been
agree.
instilled into.
I agree.
And so, if and
I
that
agree.
is it's like the momentum. That's where the morals and values.
Yeah.
It was AI came alive in this very woke
Right.
kind of
Right.
culture, and so that's what it's pushing that. And so, wouldn't it have pushed then that Jews were
Sure. Yes.
lice and
Yes.
whatever, and needed to, and so couldn't it have happened even faster,
Yes.
right? So that we can wipe out an entire humanity
I agree.
even faster.
Totally.
And so without that lag time, without that time when maybe we see it, we feel it, we smell death, we see, there's not time to reflect and figure
Yeah.
out what do we value.
Right. Right.
And that's happening more and more. I was shocked this morning when I got up and read the Boston Globe, and I expected front page to cover the mayor in Newark, New
Oh
Jersey,
yeah.
who
Right.
got arrested by ICE. And so I don't know why that wasn't, front page news. There was plenty of other,
Mm-hmm.
sort of relevant things, but um, I'm like, wow, we need to be reflecting on how we feel about that, and the morality of that, the legality of that, and is it is the news cycle so fast that that's no longer important because it happened yesterday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon?
Maybe the news cycle is already
That
captured by AI.
that scares the living crap out of me, because we need to be that, like, I sat here at the dinner because I didn't know about it until I got home last
Yeah.
evening.
Yeah.
I sat here at the dinner table and watched that on television and cried.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is happening right now?
Mm-hmm.
And I am terrified. And then I got up the next morning and there's nothing on the front
Gotcha.
page about
Gotcha.
that. And yeah, so I don't
Well,
know.
let me ask you this. In terms of that middle, the humanity, where the human values come in between the front end and the back end, do you place your faith in Sam Altman, Elon Musk, and the good old boys at Anthropic? You don't. Why not? Why not?
Now, look, I don't expect them to put their trust in me either.
Uh-huh.
And this is this is one of the issues that we're having, I think, in trying to have a conversation, which is, and I challenged one of my students the other day, who's a very good student, and still said, something that I thought was, it was like, well, maybe we need to, run. We do need to run the country more like a business. And I mean, this has been, you and I know
right.
this is not new. This is not a new theme, but certainly it is to a 22-year-old or whatever. Right. And, and it's like, well, who's going to be the CEO of that? The person that you choose? Well, yeah. And I said, well, I don't trust you to choose. And you shouldn't trust me to choose. And it's like we need probably more candidates, not less. We need fewer primaries and more in the mix that are, talking and everything, not narrowing it down to fewer. No,
Elizabeth,
I don't trust.
But Elizabeth, no. I'm going to make a statement. Tell me if you agree or disagree. I think that today, as we speak, May 10th, 2025, Sam Altman, Elon Musk, and Dario at Anthropic have more power than the president of the U.S.
Oh, I agree that they are very powerful. That doesn't mean that I should trust them or that I want them to have. But I mean, that's a different question. Whether they have power and whether, this is terrifying to me. And I think that is why judges are being arrested. That is why, because people in power are not talking about the morality and legality of things. They're not having those conversations that maybe we might have in a courtroom where here's the evidence and how are we going to, figure out, navigate this. No, they're just, it's an edict.
Should 3 to 5 humans have that much power over the future 5 years of humanity?
Of course not.
I agree with that. But it's true. But it's true, is it not?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's scary. That's scary.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons we're in the fix we're in, right? So, it's like, look, I'm going to go ahead and make this political statement because it is sort of a balanced one, but it's, I'm not suggesting that I trusted either party to do this. Okay. That makes me no less disappointed that the party that is in the majority now did not lean into free speech. That disappoints me very much. That they squandered an opportunity to be the party of free, open discussion, free thought, these kinds of discussions, as opposed to having people just be, it's inevitable. And this is what I hear a lot from people. It's like, well, it's inevitable, so you just got to go with it.
Does AI promote free speech and free thought?
Well, I don't think so. It doesn't, because it's not interested in promoting anything. So
it's a mirror. It's a mirror, right? It's a mirror.
Yeah. And so the people who are, this idea that AI is, an endorsement of free speech or whatever, again, belies what you just said, where like 5 people are in control of everything. And so, it's like, you can't have it both ways, right? So, and how are we going to have these deep moral conversations about whether,
Elizabeth, let's start here then. Elizabeth, suppose I made you, starting today, you are the founder and CEO of Anthropic. You have the best AI minds on the planet at your disposal. What would you do differently with Claude 3.7 Sonnet?
Well, I don't know enough about Claude 3.7, but just I think in general,
what would you do?
I don't know exactly what I would do, obviously, but some things that come to mind is sort of what you were just talking about, your example, your Star Trek episode, episode example, which is, how do we stop this? Like, I'd like to look at it from a different direction, because right now it's like, again, the power, the need for power, the need for affiliation, the need for achievement, the ease with which. So how I would like to ask questions from the other, thing. How do we make this less rewarding? How do we, and this is not something that they're asking themselves.
Explain that.
Yeah, less rewarding to use AI. How do we make it less of a dopamine hit to be told look, I have my little watch here and it tells me that what a good girl I am and I love it's like, look, it told me I did a good job, right? How do I make that less rewarding, right? How do I make it less likely that people are going to use, when I open up a PDF document, do you remember, you and I remember this? Remember the old days when the little paper clip would go ding, ding, ding? Yes. Okay. So this is what happens when I open a PDF document. A little AI assistant comes up and says, would you like me to summarize this article? So how do we make it less interesting? How do we make, and so I would challenge them to do that, because, how do we build in some fail safes? How do we, so yeah, they're not going to do that, because their power comes from people depending on this and using it. And I think some of them are pretty surprised at how, maybe not everybody, but many of them are pretty surprised at how fast, how easy it was. Again, a lot of psychology and psychologists are involved in this. And so not everyone was surprised, but
if you, and in your role as CEO and founder, Elizabeth, would or would it not matter to you that 0 of your AI engineers were like females? How's that for a question?
Oh, I think it would matter, but I don't. I mean, I'm sort of like a merit person, and
Okay,
I'm also
which is fine.
aphantasic, so I don't
Got
have
it.
any
Got it.
visual memory. So, but yeah, I mean, I do think it matters. And I don't think it matters to exclusion of anything else. I do think a writer like me could write a Black character into a book, and there's nothing wrong with
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah.
I don't believe that my fictional book that has I don't know, a male in
Yeah.
it, that I'm not allowed to write it because it's a male. And I feel the same way about other kinds of things. At the same time, I feel like, for example, gaming actually benefits from having females, participating in the programming of games. So yeah, I do think it would
So,
matter, and I think it would be,
which leads to my next
you know,
question. I love these questions. So, how would Anthropic benefit from having you as a female as the founder and CEO? How would it be different?
oh, well, I mean, I think I don't know a ton about this
Sure.
research, but there certainly is a fair amount of research that shows that women are quite different in their managerial techniques, and they do um, uh, what do I want to say, like, sort of enhance
Mm.
the sort of relationship qualities of. They focus on slightly different things. It's not that they're not interested in making
Sure.
money, and it's not that, but they do. They We as women say things like we use the pronoun we far more in like in a board meeting or something
Yeah.
like that than I, where a male will say I did this, I did that, and women just say like we, right? So we as women don't tend to take credit in pronoun
Yeah.
terms, as much. Little things like that build, a sense of community. It's not enough. It's not enough, but it does matter. And so, yeah, I think that I do, and they bring a different moral quality to. It's more likely stupid. I shouldn't say stupid things, but when women are higher up in an organization, they're more likely to have, childcare
Oh, sure, sure, sure.
options in
Yeah.
their benefits package, and that's not because men don't care about it. Men, it's just a
It's just a
different
different thing.
perspective. Women are
Exactly.
like,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
in fact, the way you began to answer the question shows that. You said, well, let's step back and rethink it. Let's look at it from a different direction. That's an example of how it might be a different process, a different endeavor, a different activity.
Yeah.
This is,
And that wouldn't have to be me,
yeah,
right? That could be anybody.
yeah,
And I mean, look, the team of rivals thing, right? Like,
yes,
it's like, you need
yes.
different, and you have to keep rotating that around. Otherwise you get groupthink,
Hmm.
and, you get yourself wedged in. So yeah,
So,
I'm afraid I'm not super positive
oh
about this.
no, oh
Sorry.
no. Here's a semantic question, but I think it could have some relevance. There's a great writer historian out of Israel. His name is Yuval Noah Harari, who wrote a book about sapiens, I think, or something like that. He's a great writer and thinker. He doesn't call AI artificial intelligence. He's
Okay.
chosen instead to call it alien intelligence because it's completely. Do you think that's a good word choice on his behalf?
I mean, I do think it's alien to us, although and the way that we're interacting with it is in a way that's like we're not
We're
prepared.
not
It's as
prepared.
if an alien
Right.
just sort of, it's like, oh wait, what's this? And we're trying to, it's like, oh well, it's here now, so I guess I have to figure it out. But we're not, it's like it's still, yeah. So I think it's foreign enough to enough of us so that it does feel like that. And I think that people like you and I who grew up with this sort of like the alien
Yeah, yeah,
kind
yeah.
of,
Star Trek, Twilight Zone. Yeah,
metaphor,
yeah.
yeah, those metaphors, it resonates, I think, with us. But again, I think young people would not resonate with them. It does feel very much a part of, like, research shows, for example, that the phone is actually like us, is part of the self for young people. It is not an object that's separate from
This
them.
is
It is part of
this is a true
themselves.
story to support your point. When my daughter was home, I think a month or two ago, we decided to have a daddy-daughter time to eat at a restaurant in La Jolla. We had done this when she was in prep school. And so she was home. We decided to do it for old time's sake. And so we left and we drove up 20 or so minutes up the road to La Jolla. And as I got out of the car, I noticed I had left my phone at home. No biggie, it's at home. She was amazed. Her eyes grew wide. She actually made a statement. I can't believe you left your phone at home. I could never imagine leaving my phone at home. To me, it was just, it happens, big deal. But that shows an example what you mean, a great example of a generational difference in how the cell phone is perceived. To me, it's just,
And they'll say things like, well, what would you do if you had a flat tire? Well, I guess I'd walk. I mean, do I want to? No, but I would be forced to walk to someplace,
school.
I mean, so yeah. And so it's part of the self. And so I suspect that, AI, this is one of the reasons maybe why some of those students, when we start talking, are saying, well, I'm not using it. I love writing. And yet they're using it.
Right.
Because it doesn't feel alien to them like it does to us.
This is a good insight. I appreciate this so much. And let me follow up on this insight, if I might. So I think you're so right that there's a different consciousness or relationship to AI based upon one's generation, whether one be a teenager or one be, I'm in my 60s. So let's say that. So here's my point. Those of us of the generation who remember fondly the Twilight Zone, Star Trek, The Outer Limits, those of us who resonate with those alien depictions, how can we best prepare mentally for the coming 10 years when AI, in a sense, outpaces us all? Because we will respond differently than those in their 20s and those. What's the best advice to give to those of us who remember the black and white images of the aliens and to serve man in the Twilight Zone?
Danger, Will Rogers.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think, I honestly don't think that we can prepare, because I don't think that we can anticipate that the rate of change is so rapid, is again, it's exponential, and we have not reached the asymptote yet, right? And so I don't think that you can't prepare for something
but doesn't the human mind crave order and stability?
Oh, sure. And so but we can't overlay, like, we have to create order out of our chaos, in the time that, when chaos is sort of like, when it overtakes us. We can't create, well, we can, but if we create an order in advance of the chaos, it's not going to fit.
Oh, right. Good point.
Right. Now we do, again, research shows that when presented with even just random displays or chaos or whatever, we do overlay, some sort of order. So presented with a series of random dots over time, we suggest that there's some sort of pattern.
Yes.
A static noise, we start to hear a pattern or whatever in the noise, and those kinds of things, and that's what you're talking about, is this sort of like this, not just not even a conscious craving of order, but a
sense making, or making the world
a non-conscious, something we can't control, right? It's just going to happen. But yeah, I don't think that we can. And I would say that when, like, just not that long ago, when ChatGPT first came on board, and, I don't think people believed that we would be where we are.
And that was just 2 years ago, right?
And that was just 2 years ago. Yeah. And we started, I brought it up. I mean, I remember sitting on the couch and bringing it up to my significant other, and, he was like, oh, well, he makes the joke when he saw people walking around with an iPod, and he was like, well, can you record anything on it? And they're like, no. And it's like, well, like, that's never going to take off, right? And so that internet thing, that's never going to take off. But, it's like, I said, so we got a problem, something's going to happen. And he was like, oh, our students are not that, they're not that savvy to start using it this quick, as soon as next semester. And because it was like December or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I think, and so, yeah, I don't think that we can imagine, we weren't able to imagine, I think, that students would be sitting in an in-person class cheating with AI. And so that, that feels, I feel like I'm being assaulted by things, a world that I don't
That's well
understand
put.
at an
I like that.
increasing
I like
rate,
that. I
you
like
know.
that. But that can't
And by the time,
go
oh, by
ahead.
the way, by the time I make sense of something that happened yesterday or the day before, I'm onto a new chaos. So there's really not even necessarily any point in understanding what happened last month, because I have a new, chaotic
Is there a word for that
situation.
state of being where the human is just
Yeah.
has no time to adjust? There must be a word for that.
Yeah. Well, this is what it means, for, to live basically in a war zone. It's a different kind
A
of war
war
zone.
zone.
But when you don't know,
Yeah.
if you take your next step, if you're going to step on a landmine, right? If you don't know when you're walking to school, if you're going to get kidnapped, if you don't know, whether whether your parents are going to live or die, whatever, on a constant basis. Again, this is what happens then. Our amygdala, the volume, the actual physical part of the
Yeah.
brain
Yeah.
doesn't grow, but the hippocampal volume, those connections grow. And I'm sorry, the amygdala volume grows and the hippocampal volume kind of shrinks. And you don't ever get those memories back that are those place memories and everything. All you have is this vague notion of chaos and trauma and uncertainty. And again, we crave
I
certainty.
love
So
this. I agree.
and the uncertainty then is actually very traumatic. And so when you look at, it's like they're sort of blaming poor school performance and stuff. It's like, oh, we went remote and everything. Well, no, think about what that time was. This uncertainty, this, nobody knew what the right thing to do. Now we can go back and overlay, oh, students shouldn't have
Mhm,
been at
mhm.
home and libraries shouldn't have closed, whatever. We can do that. It doesn't matter because that was then.
Right.
And the decisions were made based on the knowledge that we had then. And what did we do? And look, no matter what anybody says, what do most people do? There's always a few people who will go to outer space or whatever, but most people duck and cover, right? They fold up. It's like, I don't understand the world right
Yeah.
now. I can't figure out what I should do. So I'm going to hole up and I'm going to make my world smaller.
Yes.
I'm not going to make my world bigger.
Yes.
I'm going to make my world smaller. And so during that time, people, and so they're when you're sitting in a classroom, even, you and I are having this conversation, but if the overlay is that my parent is sick or could be sick or whatever, I'm not really
Mm,
processing what's going
mm,
on, in the
mhm,
moment. And our government feels
mhm,
chaotic. Our personal lives feel
mhm.
chaotic. And so people just have very general memories of time periods in their life where there's a lot of
I
chaos. They don't have as many specific
I have an
memories.
ironic insight or observation. Could this period of oncoming uncertainty, war zone to use your metaphor, could this ironically force even more people into AI therapy, if you think about it?
100%. Yeah.
That's kind of
Yeah.
ironic. But the very thing that's
Yeah.
causing the uncertainty, you're being drawn to. And it's just providing a big old mirror. So the more it mirrors your
Yeah.
uncertainty, the more you need the AI. It becomes a reinforcing
Well, and this is
loop.
this is the basis of, say, Jonathan Haidt's, like
Yeah.
hypothesis that,
The
the AI, the
social
whatever
media.
generation, the anxious
Yeah. Yeah.
generation about social media. And look, I mean, he presents it as a certainty. I think there's certainly questions about that. But it is sort of his thesis, right? That the very thing that is making kids the most sick, the most depressed, the most lonely, the most anxious is what they go to when they're
Right.
anxious, depressed, and
Yeah.
lonely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's a vicious cycle. And they, I mean, I don't know, maybe when your kids, I don't know, like, when did you ever punish them by they can't watch
Oh,
TV
yeah.
or
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
can't watch, and so, it's like you take a video game or whatever away and it's like, it's the end of the
Yeah.
world. It's their only friend. It's their only connection or whatever. So, So yeah, even, again, I'm not necessarily endorsing that thesis. I think that there's a case for that, and I can't, I can neither confirm nor deny. But there's, again, the offloading of memory, for example, onto our devices. And that's one of the reasons why we feel like it's part of ourselves, because it is our memory. It is our calendar. It is our reminder. It is our, whatever. And so it does feel like it's part of ourself. And we don't have to remember because we've loaded it. Our computer is going to remind us. We don't have to remember our wife's, our anniversary or our spouse's, birthday or whatever, because it's offloaded.
But as you so wisely say, it may be more of an impact for the younger generation than the older generation. So I think, ironically, the AI oncoming assault could actually increase the generational divide between us and the teenagers. I mean, I think that could be an unintended consequence of this.
Yeah. And again, unfortunately, they're the ones that are going to be taking care of us. And, we're in trouble.
Or maybe AI will become so powerful it can take care of us. We can have like AI virtual.
And we'll be like WALL-E with our little short arms and legs and our big portly bodies, and because we only have to reach for the little like sippy cup, kind of thing. We don't have to like reach under
That's so funny. That's so funny.
Our controls are right here, and our screen is right here, and we just get like.
I think, Elizabeth, this has been one of the most fun AI podcasts. More fun than most of those I've seen on YouTube. This has been a delight. So, and hopefully I've brought some positive emotion to the discussion. It's not all gloom and doom. So there is gloom and doom, but there's more to it than that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. This is great.
Coming to talk to me and for suggesting this.
Oh, yeah.
I think to Jen.
We should probably have like a round two a few months down the road, because I suspect that things will have changed even more so than they appeared on May 10th, 2025. So
yes. Well, have a lovely Saturday.
You too. Take care. All the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Oh, can I click out?
Thank you for listening. Please consider donating to the Institute for Liberal Values, a 501c3 nonprofit organization at ilvalues.org. All donations go to support our continued programming to realize our mission to provide the skills and support required to build community where there has been division, to encourage free expression where there has been censorship, and to foster optimism where there is fear.